I don't know if that's going to stay up there or what's going
We'll see how it works out. All right.
Trying to get it to.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from the headquarters of Rainier Avenue Radio, the studios, Juan Cotto and Mike Colbrese, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association for WIAA Prime Time. So welcome, and we'll just go without that.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
It's like one of those old Seattle programs. We are going to talk about the business of the WIAA tonight. So we'll go ahead and ask Mike some questions about that. But first off, they have just got out of meetings in regards to setting up the regionals for basketball. And Mike, you got the regional set up. Tell us a little bit about how that went.
Well, we delayed the implementation of the final stats from the RPI through Max Preps until 5 o'clock Monday, Juan, because we allowed the districts to go a little bit later because of the weather and their inability to get their tournaments in. So we gave them extended the deadline from, which would have been last Saturday night, midnight, to Monday night at 5, Monday evening at 5. And then staff got together and put all the information in. And we've got 96 ball games, 19 sites, and 34 doubles, which means a boys and girls team from the same school. And that becomes the challenge because everybody wants to be able to be close to their school, their town, and that's difficult to do because we use the rankings and we use who plays who, and then of course the sites themselves.
With the use of the rankings and the RPI and the technology that's gone into this, has that made it an easier process, or has it set up more expectation?
I think at this point, Juan, it's easier because you've got a hard number driven by numbers, and we don't put the numbers in. The schools put their scores from the regular season in and the district tournaments, and so it's easy from that perspective. But just like with the old criteria, you think you've got it figured out, and then always says, well, what about this? And then what we're trying to do is keep the RPI as simple and clean and pristine as we possibly can.
And that will work. Well, let's, if you like basketball, and I know a lot of you out there do, and I know Coach Craig Jackson was chiming in with us last week. For those that like basketball, next week we'll be in Tacoma. We will be doing the show from the hotel in Tacoma that is near the Tacoma Dome, and we will be getting ready to start Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station, our community radio station, the Rainier Avenue Radio.world broadcast of the state basketball tournament, which is, I believe, this is the second consecutive year that Rainier Avenue Radio has been doing this tournament. So, and obviously it's an honor and a privilege to be down in Tacoma to watch the event. And we hope that people get down there to go take a look at the event. It's always exciting, and to see the energy and the fact that these kids are playing like it is their last chance to win a championship. And for many of them, and for most of them, heck, it will be.
It will be, yeah.
The world has changed in high school sports. When Mike was playing high school sports, they gave him a leather helmet. And they went out there and told him to tackle some people. When I was playing, we had moved to face masks and plastics, but they gave me a pair of at least practice jerseys and maybe some a black pair of shoes or a white pair of shoes. And then we had some coaches, a couple of them that were well-meaning people, that they would come out there and teach us how to tackle people. But sports nowadays, we all know, has changed. Stadiums have naming rights right now. We have teams that have as many as 12 different helmet and jersey combinations in their arsenal to step up with. We have heard of stadiums in Texas being built for high school stadiums, that is, being built for $60 million. In the state of California, we saw that the Comcast purchased the state rights to the state playoffs for on a 15-year period for around $8 or $9 million. So we're seeing that this high school sports thing, this phenomena, this educational experiment is generating revenue. The National High School Federation of Sports says that over 500 million people a year attend high school sporting events. So tonight we're going to talk about the WIAA and the business of sports in Washington State. And Mike, I went ahead and took a look at your budget, which we will talk about for a second, but I'm impressed. Every budget that I looked at over the years that I could find on the internet for 4 or 5 years, it was a balanced budget, and I think that our federal legislators and our state legislators can learn a lot from you.
Well, and we are a nonprofit, Juan, owned by the member schools. Our finances are audited every year by a private firm, and we have to make ends meet. That's our responsibility. One
of the questions that I was asked by several of my friends who are in the coaching arena, and I'll leave it at that, make it a big cloud, was the money from tournaments and where does it go? And I did some sleuthing on the internet, Mike, and I looked at your 2018-2019 budget. Once again, it was balanced. It was about $4.6 million in change in terms of revenues brought in, and $4.6 million in expenditures. 92% of your budget revenue comes from comes from 5 areas. Okay, you have fees and member schools, state tournament income. You have merchandise and vendor sales. You have a corporate sponsor, and you have tournament programs and ads. So, and that represents 92% of the revenue. So it's fair to say that you guys, and the way you have set up your budget and being a nonprofit, the money that comes in, the money looks like it's being spent well.
Well, and it's about 60% of it is really spent on tournament expenses, because it isn't inexpensive to rent the Tacoma Dome or the Sun Dome or the Spokane Arena. And that's one of our concerns, Juan, is that those costs for those facilities keeps increasing. That's the major reason that we moved semifinals in football out, because we just couldn't afford to keep being indoors.
The top 5 expenditures, and you hit it, the state tournament expenses, and of course the salaries and the benefits of the staff that are going on down there. And I guess it's safe to say that these tournaments and the work that the WIAA, it just couldn't be done by waving a magic wand. You have to have staff to do that.
Well, every once in a while, somebody asks me about staffing and the cost of staffing, and we're well below the percentage that is normally regulated towards a nonprofit organization. I had someone ask me questions about staffing, somebody who's been involved with the association actually longer than I have, an administrator, and I said, how many people do you think were on staff when I got hired in '93? And the person didn't know, and I said, well, 12.6. And how many are on staff now? We're at 12.6, and that was a year ago. Now we had to cut staff because Gates receipts were down last year, and we rely on those heavily, as you saw in your numbers. So I had to cut staff.
Now, how are you getting? I mean, how has it gone 25 years? And I'm sure probably if we're in California, if we're in SIF, if we're in the Texas Interscholastic Athletic Association, they're probably adding staff. But here in Washington State, seems like we're contracting. Or maybe I'm misreading that. Around the country, how is it?
For a state association with as many schools as we have, so we're junior high, middle school, and high school, which is about 900 and some schools total. And the number of activities that we sponsor as a state association, which are really the markers that are used to determine your staffing models. We are understaffed, and actually we've had a group studying that understaffing and what we can do to bring some of that back. I quite honestly, those other states are doing what they're doing because they are what they are, and they have to do what they have to do. We're doing the same.
The entertainment value of high school athletics, and if you get a high school athletic nut like myself, I mean, I love watching the kids play, and I just love the thrill and joy of competition. And sometimes when I'm watching, I was watching the O'Day Rainier Beach game, and sometimes you get crazy. You wish you could be out there with those guys, let alone with the extra X amount of pounds that I'm carrying. I'm sure I would probably pull something. But in terms of the entertainment aspect of it itself, how does the WIAA go about trying to attract more fans to high school games? Is it really predominantly the schools that are trying to bring kids into their own venues? Do you promote the state championships? How does it all work?
Well, our hope is, of course, is that our corporate partners, dairy farmers, Les Schwab, that kind of an audience broadens the fan base. We try to convince our athletic administrators that, you know, the more that they go out and promote regular season, that translates into postseason. And of course, the other aspect of it is that we don't have a budget to go out and do promotions. We don't have a budget to advertise, so we use our website as a way to grab people, so to speak, the social media platforms that we have to create that interest as well. But we do have to spend some time and some dollars to do a better job of promoting Juan. In fact, one of the board members, Scott Chamberlain, from WI District 4, is going to chair a committee and talk about what can we do to increase the revenue of the association. Is it tournament format? Is it tournament sites? Is it more events? More activities, because we're getting a lot of interest in esports, a lot of interest in lacrosse. So those things are going to be something that the next director, Mick Hoffman, will get to move forward.
Who is the actual customer? Looking at the revenues, some would say the member schools are your customer. The services are obviously focused on our youth. Are the youth the customer? Who do you see, and who does the WIAA believe is their primary customer?
Well, the ownership is the member schools, because they decide every spring whether or not to join the association. So they're the ownership. The customer are those people who come to state events, because as you saw, a great deal of our budget comes from people walking through the turnstiles. We get about 11% of our budget from corporate partners. We get about 11% of our budget from membership fees, service fees. And then the balance comes from people who walk through the turnstile. So it's families, it's school people, it's students, and it's the average fan, that fan who just wants to, like you and me, come and watch a ball game.
Tom Merrill, the coach, a longtime coach, Kennedy Catholic, Mount Rainier, and one of the great personalities in high school sports. Tom, when I was the head football coach at Highline High School, we were watching my JV team play, and he said, and I was complaining about my uniforms, and I said, I had to just go out and get those Penn State uniforms, and I had the white jerseys with a purple number and a gold helmet, just real basic. And he said to me, Coach Cotto, your helmet, your uniforms have a number on the front of them and a number on the back of them. That's all you need. He goes, those are great uniforms. Congratulations. and that always stuck with me. Mike, it seems like things are changing in our society in terms of how people are starting to look at schools with different jerseys. And, of course, this is the kind of the Oregon Nike reaction, right? I mean, in Oregon had about 150 uniforms, and now teams and parents and players, they feel that that's such a big part of it. And I know that the WIAA doesn't have rules over that, but is that taking away some of the benefit to the sport, having all these folks who have all these different uniforms? You see one team with this.
Yeah, I don't know if it takes away from the sport. One, there I would imagine there are people who argue that it adds to the sport. It adds to the value of watching these students participate. And we were talking earlier about culture. I think it's the culture that we're dealing with. The fact that there's a chance that those kids are out there playing ball, play on other clubs, on other teams. They may have been in different parts of the country and seen other, and been a part of other competitions at different levels. And so that kind of filters its way back into the high school program. And I don't know that it takes away. I don't know that it adds. It's just the way things are moving.
When I was a kid at O'Day High School, I believe, we paid for our ASB card, and the games were $6 a pop. And then I started going, I was in the early part of my career, games are $6 a pop. The games are still relatively inexpensive. They're still $6. Has the WIAA ever, and the member schools, have you looked at increasing the ticket price a little bit to keep up with inflation?
We have a rotation, so to speak, Juan. The other year, we look at whether or not to raise ticket prices. And then on the off year, every other year, we look at raising the membership fees themselves, because we have to be able to sustain the association. It's just the cost of doing business. You know, the cost of heating goes up, the cost of electricity goes up, you know, maintenance of buildings, that type of thing. Salaries, of course, increase. We're living in a very affluent part of the country, so to speak. And although we have poverty and we've got people who are struggling to make ends meet, we also have a lot of people who aren't. In fact, the Seattle Times has just been running a series of articles about the wealth of this area of the country. So we have to be able to develop a competitive wage to make sure that happens. You know, I think really people want services. They want a direct response. They want to be able to have a contact with something other than somebody in their home community. 35% of the contact we get every day is from parents who are concerned. Maybe they've tried with their schools and they're not getting the answers they want or had hoped for, and they were checking with us, or they simply want to complain about something that's going on and get some help. So our clientele is saying they want more. But we're trying to let them know that our bosses, so to speak, our ownership, like I said earlier, is really the member schools. And they've got to start with that member school to build that groundswell of support and connectivity, because these are school programs. They belong to the schools and the kids.
You're listening to Mike Colbrese, the executive director of the Washington Activities Association. Let me get that right. The Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, the WIAA, on WIAA Prime Time on RainierAvenueRadio.world, your community radio station, our community radio station. And we are talking about the business of high school athletics. Mike, one of the reasons that professional sports has had such a tremendous impact on society is because of television. And we know that the state playoffs here in Washington State are televised on Root Sports. And I know they do the basketball tournament, and they do the girls and boys, and I know they do the football tournament and specific events. And there's certain events during the year. Has that had an opportunity to raise any sort of revenue at all? Or is there a business aspect to that?
Yeah, there is one, and that's a good point. Years ago, it was very common for state associations to have lucrative television contracts with when I first came here, it was Cairo. And those state championships for the big schools for basketball and football were on TV. Well, over the years, it gradually came into where it was Prime Sports, and then it was Northwest Fox, and now it's Root. And they're great people. We have a good relationship with Root. But what's happening, of course, is that they're not getting the revenue that they need to make a production worthwhile. So they're being supplemented by other things. And while where we used to get some kind of a fee for those productions, we're not getting that fee anymore. We're not in any different than any other state association, although there are some like Minnesota and North Dakota that have very lucrative contracts, particularly for hockey. But we don't have those kinds of lucrative contracts. So what's happened in the interim is that our national body, the National Federation of State High School Associations, has started a network, and it's a digital network. So most of our games, state championships, can be seen through a subscription basis. And it's amazing the comments that we get from all over the world, from fans, relatives who may have never gotten a chance to watch their school play or a relative play, and now getting a chance to because of that. It's a more lucrative contract than we had in the old days of television, but it still is it's short in a sense, so to speak, to from where we would like it to be. So it's subscription based, and that helps drive what we might get in the long run, which will keep ticket prices at a stable rate, and it won't raise our membership service fees. You know, for the time when we went through that crazy economic downturn, the board made the decision they weren't going to raise service fees on ticket prices. So for 7 years, it was all flat, always the same ticket price. That, in hindsight, probably was a real good gift, but it did put the association behind a little bit financially.
You're listening to Juan Cotto and Mike Colbrese, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Athletic Activities Association. I will promise to get this right, Mom. Get me on that. At least I'm pronouncing it correctly.
No, you're doing a great job.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world, our community radio station, your community radio station. You took this job in 1993. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest changes in regards to the business aspect that you've noticed since 25 years ago?
Well, I think a lot of it is the visibility. High school sports used to be the only game in town, Juan. Even when the Sonics were here, and even with the Seahawks, of course, and the Mariners, high school was really important, and it was validated by attendance at events. The difference is that there's still a lot of support and belief in the value of school programs, but people aren't valuing it by going and buying a ticket to watch a game. They're staying home and doing other things, or they're going out and doing other things. There's more competition for the dollar. So that makes it harder for state associations to make sure that we're staying above the waterline. I think that's the one thing. I think social media has also not only changed the culture, but it's changed participation in activities programs as far as being a fan, because they can tweet a friend or get an update from the game because of the electronic media that's available on scores and updates. So I think that's it. And I also think that not only is there a difference in finances, there's a difference in participation. When you and I played ball, you went out for the team because that's just what you did. Now you're probably specializing in that sport, certainly much more than maybe 10 years ago. Specialization is really impacting participation, which in my mind changes the culture of the school and changes the support mechanism that was typically in place for those kids that are wanting to go to support and those who want to play.
When it's interesting, back in my day, it seemed that the female sports, number one, there wasn't as many female athletes, and the quality of play wasn't very good. I just watched a basketball game on Saturday night with West Seattle and Garfield. That is easily one of the best basketball games I've ever seen. Between the West Seattle girls and the Garfield girls. Plenty of heroines on both teams, dramatic plays, physical play, injuries, the whole 9 yards, and a dramatic finish. What has been in the last 25 years? It just seems like the female game has also picked up, and how has that impacted sports in general?
I think first of all, the impact is on those young ladies, because we know the value of school programs. We know what it does for students. It prepares them for the rest of their lives. So the most positive impact is on each one of those individuals who grew through their participation. From that point on, I mean, there's no doubt it does stretch resources a little bit more. But again, the pie is the same. You just divide it differently, and everybody gets an equal opportunity to participate. That's a good thing, because everybody should be in this together for the student participants.
We have just a couple of more minutes left, but let's talk about Mike Colbrese over the last 25 years, and thinking about the future, and of course with the new director coming in. What is the one, or maybe give us one thing that you probably look back and say, "Geez, I wish I would have done X." In regard, just surely to the business side.
I think I came here in '93, but I actually started in state association work in 1982.
Okay.
Both of my daughters were born after I went to work for a state association back in Montana. When I look back, I wish I would have been smart enough to realize that the job was going to get done. And I would have spent more time with my kids.
Absolutely.
I mean, this job, and everybody out there is in the same boat. We all probably spend too much time at work. I've been criticized for not spending enough time with my family, and can't get that back. I can try to make it up. That's part of it. Yeah.
I hear you. No. And as a high school football coach in the 5 years I spent at Highline High School, and the 6 years that the 1 year I spent at Franklin as a head coach, especially in the head coaching, let alone being an assistant coach for the other 7 years, for a total of 13 years, you do spend, it's almost like your kids grow up without you in the fall. And certainly boy, those are tough years to get back, as we all learn as parents.
The upside is that when they were with me, they were always around educators, around people who wanted to have fun, who cared about people, and so they got an upside, but it just wasn't enough.
Give me your thoughts in a couple of minute window on the future of high school sports. Give us the business itself. You're leaving the WIAA obviously in a strong position. And as a new executive director comes in and starts to look at opportunities, where do you think those things will grow in the future?
Well, I think first of all, Mick will bring a good energy. He'll bring new ideas. He'll bring a different kind of voice, but a strong voice to the value of school programs. When I look at school programs, I think what we're starting to see is people come back to the community. They're coming back to schools because they realize that we can't do things in isolation. And where that all comes together is where we are gathered together, whether it's in church or whether it's at a coffee house or whether it's a school building. People want to be part of a collective body to do something greater than themselves. When I talk to groups, one of the things that I tell them, that I believe our generation is responsible for, is training the next generation to fix the things that we couldn't. And we've got a few things that we've left over for the next generation. And hopefully we've provided them with the skill sets and the relationship building that's necessary to take care of those issues. Because there are some tough challenges facing this generation.
We will be in Tacoma next week for the state 4A and 3A basketball championships, or at least we'll have a preview show there, and then in 2 weeks we'll do a review show and look at the state tournament. Mike, I know Tacoma to me always so many games I've been down there for my Fighting Irish and for other schools. Your feelings about Tacoma and the Tacoma Dome, and I know that that relationship obviously has been negotiated and massaged out over the years, but it's still a special place.
It's a special place. I mean, when I talk to my peers from around the country, they are envious of the fact that we can be indoors. They are surprised that we play 2 basketball games at the same time. So it provides us that opportunity. I've got some special memory. I've seen some great athletes perform, some great coaches, some who have gone, which is always tough because you build a relationship with them, whether you fight a little bit or argue a little bit. They're still all special people because we're all in for the kids. But yeah, the Dome has a lot of special memories. A lot of people there make it work as well.
Well, we are looking forward to being there next week in Tacoma for the state basketball championships. And to sit down, we will have WIAA Primetime Sports on at 7 o'clock. We will be in Tacoma, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm just excited about being in Tacoma. I'm excited about the tournament. And I'm just looking forward to seeing some great action on boys and girls sides, and obviously there'll be some great basketball games. I'm sure there'll be some exciting moments. There'll be some controversy and everything in between.
It all works its way in. It's a great show.
Looking forward to seeing everyone, and looking forward to seeing you, Mike, next week from Tacoma for the state basketball championships on WIAA Primetime Sports. So for Mike Colbrese, the executive director of the WIAA, this is Juan Cotto saying we will see you next week in Tacoma.
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you, Mike. I'll start behind you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you what. 28 minutes go so fast.
Oh, God. Doesn't it, though?
Oh, man.
That's what happens when you're having fun.
You know what?